Hi guys, Miss Sweet yet again. Let's take a look at our week 5 packet for day 3. Week 5, day 3 for ELA. So first, let's check your phonics work from yesterday. So flip back to the page that had all of these pictures and you had to choose, is it the OA vowel team or the OW vowel team that's going to make the O sound? So just like always, compare your work to mine. If you get it right, give it a little check. If you got it wrong, fix your mistake. No big deal. Number 1 was coat. Number 2, snow. 3, row. 4, soap. 5, crow. 6, goat. Oh, that's so cute. Look at him in his little boat. Oh, man. Okay, 7, grow. 8, toad. Woohoo. 9, show. 10, coach. 11, throw. And 12, float. Then in the next section, you had to find the rhyming words. You had to figure out what the picture was showing and then come up with your own word that rhymes with that family. So for grow, we have snow, throw, and then the one I came up with is no. So I have a little picture of a thought bubble going, aha. You could have come up with any word that has that O sound at the end. For number 2, load, we've got toad, road, and then, oh man, I didn't do a good job. I did load again, but I drew a picture of it. So you probably did a better job than me coming up with a word to rhyme with toad and road that wasn't load like the example. Whoops, teacher mistake. And then last but not least, we've got goat. So there's float, coat, and my rhyming word was boat. Drew a little boat. Doesn't look super safe. Wouldn't advise going out on the water in that boat, but any word that ends with oat would work. So awesome job. And now let's look at your phonics activity for today. All right. So the activity for today, you'll see there are 2 sentences and then a little picture by it. And thinking about that OA and that OW vowel team, I want you to pick the sentence that matches the picture. You're going to circle it, and then you're going to pick one of the sentences and write your own story about it. Now, this story can be as silly or as serious as you want it to be, but it needs to feature at least 5 O words that use that OW or that OA vowel team. But lucky for you, there is a word bank to help you think of some of those words. You can underline them or circle them in your writing to make them pop out. And if you want to show off your story, you can send me a picture or you can call me to read it to me. But I can't wait to read what you come up with. Awesome. So now let's move on to our RRW work, thinking about Canada. All right, so first, let's look at your matching activity from day 1. I want to apologize because some of the answers on this activity are wrong, and I was telling you to match the province with the description of it, but some of them are actually meant to match the vocabulary word. So if this was really tricky for you, don't feel bad. It's not your fault. But go ahead and check out your work and compare it to mine. The ones that are totally correct are Ontario and Yukon and Newfoundland. But the Manitoba and British Columbia and the Forestry and the Wild West, those ones I don't agree with that. So check it out. But I'm glad you tried, and I'm sorry if it was really frustrating. And a special shout out to Greta, who was not only the first person to finish her sort, but also was the first person to realize that some of the answers were incorrect and don't make sense. So way to go, Greta. That looks awesome. Now let's look at the questions that you answered using the poem. All right, so the first question asks, what is this poem mainly about? I wrote, this poem is mainly about Canada's 10 provinces and what makes each one unique. So long as your answer includes that Canada has 10 provinces and kind of what the poem is telling us about, you're set. Again, if you got it right, little check. If you made a mistake, no big deal, just fix it. For number 2, they asked for the name of the 10 provinces. So if you want to pause your screen here and make sure you have these 10, go for it. They are British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, Newfoundland, Ontario, Quebec, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Maybe you're like, Miss Wheat, I found 13. You are not wrong. The poem's a little bit tricky. In Canada, there are 10 provinces, and then there are 3 extra territories that are mentioned in the poem. And those territories are the Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest. So if you included those and you have 13, no big deal. The provinces are more like states, and territories just kind of have different rules. But how would you know that? You're in 2nd grade. So if that was tricky, don't worry about it. But I do want you to make sure that you have the 10 official provinces. So go ahead and change your chart if you need to make any corrections. And then last was that tricky question to find an example of figurative language. So I said one example of figurative language in this poem is when the poet says that Alberta is a Wild West kind of place. Because like we talked about, figurative language is when you describe something by comparing it to something else. If you said Wild West kind of place for your answer, cool. But I also want to show you some other examples of figurative language in the poem. So there's the example we talked about yesterday of British Columbia being the jewel of the West Coast. It's not actually a jewel, it's just like a jewel because it's special. So I underline that one in yellow. The Wild West kind of place because Alberta is like the Wild West. Because when we hear Wild West, we think about cowboys and horses and the desert and no rules. That's kind of what they're showing us about Alberta. Another example could be in Ontario when they describe it as the home of the government. Since the Ontario is not actually a house, the government isn't a person who lives there, but the city is where the government is run. So that could count as figurative language, kind of loosely, but I think it would count. And then the last one, the 3 Musketeers of the Sea, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, because they're like the 3 Musketeers. They're like 3 friends who stick together. So all of those are examples of figurative language, and if you chose one of those, awesome. If you didn't, I'm glad you tried, and I hope that you understand it a little bit better now. We're going to keep working on it in 2nd grade and 3rd grade and 4th and 5th, all the way up through college. You'll be thinking about figurative language. So don't worry too much right now. Awesome. So now let's look at your activities for today. All right, so for today, you are going to reread the poem. I hope you're getting so fluent with it, and some of those tricky province names, you're getting really good at saying them. But you're going to reread the poem, but today you're also going to be annotating, and we know annotate is just a fancy way to say mark up your paper and take notes. So let's look at your annotation key. Now, because it's a poem, the annotations we make are going to be a little different. So you're going to really have to hunt for some of this stuff in the poem. So you're going to underline the figurative language. Underline, let's say the describing language. Anything describing, go ahead and underline it. Then you're going to put a box around who is narrating each stanza, each chunk of the poem. When we say narrating, we mean who's talking. So you're going to put a box around whoever you think is talking in each stanza, in each chunk. Okay, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. All right, then you're going to circle any words or phrases that you're not really sure what they mean or you've never heard them before. That one's the same as normal. And then another one that's the same is put a question mark by places where a question pops into your head, and you can write that question down in the blank space in the margin. So you're going to go ahead and annotate your poem and use this annotation key to help you remember the special things you're doing because it's a poem instead of an informative paragraph. Once you've annotated, we've got some more text-dependent questions to answer. So let's look at the first one. It shows you a little bit of the text. It says, "My name is British Columbia, the jewel of the West Coast. Forestry and fishing are the things that I do most." And the text-dependent question that it's asking you is, what are two unique features British Columbia describes? So you're going to write about two things that make British Columbia special just from that chunk of text. And you're going to answer in a complete sentence. Your next question is asking, who is narrating the poem? And narrating means who's telling us this information? Whose perspective are we getting the poem from? So who's telling us this poem, and what details from the text helped us to know that? Okay, so who's telling the poem, and how do you know that it's them telling? And hint, it's not always a person. Okay, so think about that, and we'll talk about it more tomorrow. Then it says paraphrase the final stanza. So that's the last 4 lines, the last chunk of the poem. And when it says paraphrase, it means put it into your own words. What is the central message of the poem? So what is it trying to teach us? What does the poem want us to know about Canada? And then, this is a big question. Then it's asking, how do all the other stanzas, all the other chunks about all the provinces, how does it connect to the central message of the poem? Okay, so think about that. These are tough 3rd grade questions, but I want you to think about them. Try your best, and then we'll talk through them tomorrow. And then your last activity for today, I know this has been a lot, but you're going to write a summary with the key points, ideas, and details. So you're going to start with the text is mainly about, because in a summary, you tell the big stuff, not the itty-bitty details, but overall, what did you learn from the poem? And remember those question words, who, what, when, where, why, how, those are really helpful when you're writing a summary. Okay, so give it your best shot, and then we'll talk through these tomorrow. Awesome. I know that this is a lot of tricky work, but I just want you to try your best. I think you're going to surprise yourself with how much you can analyze this poem and understand it, even though it's tough, and even though you're really having to dig deep by yourself since we're not in class together. But I want you to try. Worst thing that happens, you make a mistake. Okay, we'll check in again tomorrow, and we'll keep working on this. Awesome job. Let me know if you have any questions. Shout out to a lot of kids have been texting or calling to ask if we can work on it a little bit together, and we always can. So if you need a little extra help, just let me know. And I love you, and I miss you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.